Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we have John Burney on again. Yay! And he's talking about his book, The Unbelievable Happiness of What Is. And we're going to be talking about realization. What is it? What does it mean? How do we get there? How long will it take? How long will it take, John? Are we there yet?
I love the question, CJ. So good to see you
It's
again. And
it's
I was
so good to
delighted.
see
I was looking
you.
forward to it. I've been sharing lately that awakening is really, I like to use the word awakening,
Hmm.
is a way of life. It's not a goal to achieve.
Hmm.
I think when people see it as a goal to achieve, there's that part of it. There's the longing for freedom. There's a longing for realization. There's a and what is that? What is being referred to?
Hmm.
And the way I see it is that we're really, um, how can I say this? We're tuning into and becoming aligned with our essential nature.
Hmm.
And what that really is it's the life force.
Hmm.
It's the creative force. It's an intelligent force. It's a learning force. It's a healing force. It's a transformative force. And so when people refer to the truth, what they're really pointing at is an experience of that force or a glimpse of that force or a taste of that. And generally, when somebody has that awakening experience or kind of altered access to that reality of our deeper nature, if they're ready and it's time for them, they're going to long for that and to want to have more of that because it's
Hmm.
an extraordinarily wonderful experience of it can be many it can be experienced in many ways from our human perspective, and some of the common ways people talk about it are equanimity or peacefulness, unconditionally loving, fulfilled, connected, radiant, vibrantly alive.
Hmm.
The purpose of life really is to realize one's true nature.
Hmm.
We can accomplish all the goals we set up for ourselves, and that's wonderful when we can do that. Wonderful when we can do that. But life really has meaning when we align with this true force of our
Hmm.
truth.
So then realization or awakening, they're the same words it's two words that represent the same idea. And is enlightenment the same idea?
I don't really peddle in ideas. I don't really, people have all kinds of concepts
Mm-hmm.
and thoughts and beliefs about this. But, in my new book, The Unbelievable Happiness of What Is, the real title is Beyond Belief because
Mm-hmm.
it's beyond belief to love, fulfillment, and spiritual awakening. These ideas we have, these concepts we have, these definitions that we've learned or heard, we've read, we've listened to people, teachers, whoever talk about them, they have a place and they're helpful. But at some point, you develop in your path where you're really realize you're on your own, that
Hmm.
you're really an explorer and a scientist in an experiment of an unknown territory.
Hmm.
That's very much what our life is.
Hmm.
And so often, even though people achieve everything they want on a relative level, they go, well, what's the point?
Hmm.
What am I doing here? What's life? What's the purpose of life? What's the meaning of life? I think when people ask that question, wherever they come from, however that arises for them, eventually they come face to face with finding the truth, so to speak.
Hmm.
And so when we begin to become more intimate with that, when we begin to become more embodied in that aliveness, our life naturally, unconditionally has meaning and purpose.
Hmm.
So the fundamental purpose of life is to be fully alive
Hmm.
each moment, because any moment this appearance will vanish.
Hmm.
And we don't really know what's next
Hmm.
after this so-called life. So there's a profound transformation that happens in what's called realization.
Mm-hmm.
Many people, the other thing to say about it is that the life force is a force of nature. It's like gravity. You can use gravity to, you know, gravity can be, well, let me put it this way. I'm trying to, um, I'm trying to talk about this in a way that might be different than what people are used to, because
Mm-hmm.
the way I see it now is that it's a force, it's a power. It isn't right or wrong, good or evil. It's like money, it's neutral.
Mm-hmm.
It can be used for good, but actually can also be used for evil. So
Hmm.
people say, "Oh, well, they're enlightened. Why are they behaving this way? Why are they hurting their students, or why are they acting in this way?" And so these definitions, these old definitions, people assume that a certain
Ah, I get it. Okay, so you can either be Darth Vader or you can be Luke Skywalker. I mean,
exactly,
it's you're
it's the
actually
force.
tapping into the life force. It depends on what.
It's the exactly. So
Uh,
that's probably why throughout history, a lot of what has been emphasized is morality.
mm,
Because once you access that power, if you are not a balanced human being, or if you're, and you have a very unexamined dark side, you could do a lot of damage, and that happens today. It's happening today. I'm privy to that, and it's happened plenty in the past. And there's many people who have,
does that mean Donald Trump is a realized being? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
you
God
but he,
help us.
but, and I don't want to go there, but he
No, I
does
know.
have, but people have power in a lot of different ways, and we are very seduced by it. Just because somebody
Mm,
can access the force of nature, they could have a powerful presence,
mm-hmm.
and if you're around them, it can have a very almost you could go into an altered state that's like bliss or
By
whatever,
being
and you
around them. Wow,
and
even though they're
you
accessing life energy, but maybe there's darkness within them.
because we're seduced by that power, we can easily be, naively trusting.
Mm.
And I would like to say to people, be careful,
Mm. Oh,
because
you mean
this,
so we may meet Darth Maul or Darth Vader, and it's exuberating being around
and
that
we're
life
we're
energy.
in love, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, it's so beautiful, it's so powerful, it's so overwhelming. But
Mm.
that's just that, that's like taking a drug.
Mm.
It hasn't,
Mm.
you can have just because you're having a profound altered state. What does that really mean?
Mm.
All it means is you're having a profound altered state. Just
Mm.
because you're experiencing or having access to power, what does that mean? All it means is you have access to power.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean you're trustworthy. It doesn't mean you're a balanced human being.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean anything other than that. But we've had to, find out through the school of hard knocks in our generation, because a lot of the teachings that are coming from the East, are, the language and the way it's described is ancient,
Mm-hmm.
ancient.
Mm-hmm.
But we're living in modern times where people are becoming much more aware of psychodynamics and, healing the traumas of the personal self, and understanding how that, and this is a lot of my work, as you probably know, that when you really understand the interface, the so-called interface between the relative and the absolute, between the personal and the divine, between unconsciousness and realization, when you begin to understand how they work together, you realize ultimately they're not separate.
Okay, so here's what I've noticed. I've interviewed a lot of spiritual folks, frankly, some of which are assholes. I'm like, what? Why are you in this elevated place telling people what to do? You're kind of an asshole. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think, how could you be enlightened and still have all of these
This
troubling
is thank
interactions?
thank you. This is where I recommend everyone take that term and erase it, flush it. It's not
Take
helpful.
which term and flush it.
Enlightened.
Oh.
That's just, any any definition of a particular so-called attainment or person is another identity. It's not real. And what we ultimately find freedom, realization, is the realm where you're not identified. But you do see people who have a great deal of power who are super identified and are incredibly narcissistic and are, very charismatic, and people follow them. They follow them to Jonestown. One of my oldest friends' sister died at Jonestown with Jim Jones with 900 other people. But I've been very, very interested in the abuse of power for a long time. And ever since, so long before that even, but I've seen so many horrific examples of good people trying to do good work and helping people. And Sharon, who followed Jim Jones, I remember her talking to her when she was living at the People's Temple here in San Francisco, way back. Her brother, Graham, who I've been friends with since I was 3, called me and said, I'm really worried about Sharon. I really wished you would, get in touch with her and see what's going on because she's getting really strange. And I got together with her, and she was just, Jim Jones to her was a saint. He was helping all these people, and she was interested in helping people. She didn't know any better, and she followed him down to Guyana, and that, she died there.
Wow. And so how does one make sure that a teacher that they're working with, passes the test? Because they can, as you said, the power and the energy is so intoxicating. It's very easy to get swept up.
This is a real problem, because a lot of people who are drawn to spirituality are often very wounded. They often have they've come from backgrounds where there's been a lot of difficulty, and often they have a lot of unfulfilled parental needs. And so they very easily will project those onto an authority figure and want to be saved, want to be taken care of. I mean, the cults that have gotten lots of people in their cults, I remember when the, I don't know which group it was, the Moonies or something, San Francisco, they used to, they do love bombing, and they get you to come to their dinners, and they just, give you all this attention. And there's just this, they know that people are vulnerable. They're vulnerable. So if you're really vulnerable, I'd say go to a therapist.
And so here's the interesting question, because if you talk to a spiritual teacher and you talk to a psychotherapist, they'll tell you I'm having a hard time, my ex is doing Y and I'm very upset. Okay, so the psychotherapist would say, let's talk about, what the ex that they're doing and who's the what. They would go into the story. And a lot of the spiritual folks would say, okay, give it up to God, surrender it, let it go. And so I find that these two approaches, in some cases, I do this, I do the kind of dig in, and sometimes I don't. And if you talk to spiritual folks that I've interviewed, they'll say, if you focus too much on this, you're like, it's like planting a seed and watering it and allowing this plant to grow. So, take it, clip it, it's a weed, get rid of it. So you have these two diametrically opposed suggestions on how to deal with our wounded self. What's your thought? Because what's interesting, I think, about your work is that it's a beautiful blend between these two things.
Yeah, and I think they should be. I mean, it isn't one or the other, because they're not separate. There's no separation. Even in Zen, basic Zen teaching is form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. In other words, there's no separation between absolute reality and relative reality. They're literally made of the same thing. Relative reality, all aspects of relative reality, including mind, including thought, including feelings, sensations, all organic functions are fundamentally fueled by the life force that we are. So it's a misunderstanding to think that you can cut off one, because you can't. We are an intricate, intimate, infinitely incomprehensible ecosystem of functioning. There is no separation between. There is no separation. Now, is there value in focusing on one or the other? Absolutely. So a lot of the spiritual teachings have been very focused on God or the divine or spirit or presence. And so that's kind of like surgical training for so-called enlightenment. Problem is people can become very lopsided.
Mm.
They can just develop, the power of the spirit, but not develop as a person. I don't know if I mentioned,
Ah,
I don't
yes,
know
I
if I
get it.
mentioned in our last interview, Sri Aurobindo, who
Mm.
founded was it called? He wrote The Life Divine, and I think he founded Pondicherry in India, and he was an amazing kind of saint. And I very inspired by him in my early years when I was in my early 20s. And one of the things he wrote about was he wrote The Life Divine, which is really to have enlightenment in daily life, not just
Mm-hmm.
monk life.
Mm-hmm.
And so he actually gave this example, which I love, very simple. He says, if you start your life experience and you have this much experience, so it's like a triangle, it's like the base of the triangle is like 1 inch.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go up to the pinnacle up here to the top, which is enlightenment. This is what you have to offer. This. He goes, but if your life is like really big here, and when you get up here, it may take you longer to get up here, but when you get up here, this is what you have to offer.
Ah.
So he had a saying, which was the greater the sinner, the greater the saint.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
So this
that
is the lopsided piece that you're talking about, because if we lean too much, if like there's only in not tuning into the human experience, and we're kind
I
of
mean,
missing out of life.
everybody has their own unique unfoldment, absolutely unique. This is where when you get to a certain point in your unfoldment and your discovery, you realize you can't follow another human being.
Hmm.
That the essence of what transforms us, this presence, this aliveness, is universal.
Hmm.
It has countless names. We could list them all.
Mm-hmm.
And, the divine, God, emptiness, cosmic consciousness, the Tao, um, awakened consciousness, enlightenment, all the different words that refer to this life. I like to call it life force.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, yeah. And so, losing my train of thought
You were
here.
saying you were talking about that all of that. We were talking about the lopsidedness, and you were talking about kind of the concentration on the spirit, the tiny funnel, or the concentration on our human aspect,
Well, both.
and you're saying that everyone has their own path, and combining one or the other, and
Everyone, yeah,
and I guess
exactly.
my question is, how do you know when you are lopsided? Like, we talked about a beautiful cone like this, but it could look like this, right? Where you're so entrenched in the human experience that you forget about the spiritual experience. And then you
Well,
could have like a really sharp point going up. So how do you know? I know I know the answer is it depends, but maybe can you show me what an unbalanced version of one or the other looks like, so I know what the kind of boundedness, if there is any. I know that's the wrong word to use for you in particular. I know you don't want to talk about concepts.
I what I'm teaching fundamentally, CJ, is how to learn.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And learning is only possible with an open mind that is not cluttered with concepts.
Mm.
So basic training for learning is mindfulness training and simple meditation training where you bring attention to body sensations, breath, feelings, thoughts, such that you begin to develop a bigger perspective of your life. If you don't have that, you're not going to be able to answer your question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not an externally diagnosed situation. It's really an ongoing balancing act that each person has to find. So learning is really, I say it's life is completely improv.
Mm.
It's all experimental. It's all trial and error. It's making mistakes and learning, falling down, getting up. This is how we learn. Learning is difficult. It's hard. It's painful. Gathering knowledge and having a lot of tons of information. That's not learning. That's just becoming knowledgeable. But
Mm.
to really have wisdom, to really be healed and transformed, you have to learn. You have to learn how to learn. So most people don't want to learn how to learn. They want to know the answers before.
Mm.
So
Mm.
this is kind of a mental top-heavy approach that doesn't work,
Mm.
and it gets in the way. So
Mm.
at some point, you have to just tune into yourself, get in touch with yourself, begin to become more sensitive, intuitive, and listening inside and say, how am I right now? Am I out of balance? Am I
Mm.
is my so you, each person has to make that determination on their own on an ongoing basis.
Mm. Okay,
This
so
is this is
let's
so
that's
wait,
yeah,
wait.
go ahead.
So this is like so you're like this is like surfing. You're not controlling the waves, you're not controlling the ocean, but you're learning how to align with that force. This
Mm.
is what true spiritual practice is, learning how to align with the force of nature. Otherwise, we think we're in control and we're getting enlightened and we're doing it. And that's
Mm.
completely not true.
Mm.
Enlightenment actually is a description of our true nature that we already are.
Mhm.
The reason we're not experiencing it is because we have layers of personal identity overlaying it. Now, Suzuki Roshi, who was quite a beautiful, enlightened teacher who wrote Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, said, about what you were talking about earlier, says you take the mind weeds, all the material, the dirt, and you pull them out, but then you put them back in the dirt because it nourishes the plant. He understood
Mm. Mm.
that work.
Mm.
And it's like the question is, how does that work? Well, in my work and a lot of what I do with and have discovered over the 4 decades I've been working with people is that when somebody expresses their condition, not not running a story in their head, that's different, but when they really express from a heartfelt or a gut felt or a body felt place what they're going through, there's an energetic movement that happens. It begins to facilitate what I would call a healthy discharge of that emotion, because emotion
Mm.
is just the natural weather system needing to circulate. Okay. So, not getting caught in the story, but just letting that release. When that actually happens, when somebody can actually have a clear discharge of emotional energy, what follows is an expansion into the true nature. It actually
Mm.
facilitates the deepening and expansion into the light. And
Mm.
so we begin to see that the relative work, the human work, actually facilitates naturally the spiritual side. So we don't really do the spiritual thing. A lot of people have a completely misunderstanding that they're getting enlightened, that they're doing spiritual practice. No, they're not. They're doing human practice, and the spiritual transformation is nature. It's like if you planted a seed in your garden, you provide the soil, you water it, you feed it, you make sure it has the right exposure. But are you making it grow?
No.
Thank you. Are you making your digestion work? Are you
Mm.
making your brain work?
Mm.
Making your heart pump blood? What is doing that? And what is doing it is the life force.
Mm.
And it is an intelligent, learning, creative force.
Mm.
And so we learn to align with that so that's what I mean when I say awakening is a way of life. Awakening is an ongoing surrender into that and learning from that. And then you don't get caught up in all of this identity confusion around what spiritual is. Otherwise, people have blissful experiences, they try to hold on to them and they think it's
Mm.
onto some state. Or they go to neurofeedback and they're trying to get the right brain waves to have the right state of mind. Or they're doing various kinds of, medicinals like ayahuasca or various kinds of psychedelic things to help open their mind or open their spirits. And, you know, my motto with anything like that is whatever helps the process. Everyone
Mm.
has to learn in their own way.
Mhm.
So I know that the natural force of awakening, finally, the natural force of awakening is what's running my life and your life and running the whole universe. And I'm in service to that. I mean, I have long since been in the belief that this is my life.
Okay, why we're both laughing is
Because
because,
you connected.
yeah, I finally connected.
Yes.
And then I started laughing. And because people were probably like, what the hell is wrong with her?
Well, they might feel it actually, because the people do feel it amazingly on the recordings. Even with the podcast that I do. By the way, the latest one, I don't know if you've heard, is Already Are, is a really good took. I'd recommend your listeners. It'd
Okay.
be actually quite good. You go to my website, johnburney.org, go to podcast page. It's the latest post, I think, Already Are. I love the talk. It was very recent. And my niece, who's editing my stuff, said, I said, she goes, yeah, it's much more instructive. I think I'm getting better at instruction. It's not been
Mm.
my forte, but I think I'm getting better at it.
Okay, so here's where I was gonna go.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm closing the pipes or not. I'll try not to.
All
All
right.
right, but so here's been my current experience. So I would say probably a good portion of my life I've done kind of the psychological approach. I have a goal. What's blocking me? What are the thoughts, beliefs, attitudes that are blocking? And then using energy to release those things and then traveling through life with a new consciousness in some ways because as that those beliefs get, clipped off or whatever, they're I can see the world more clearly. And that sorry, each time I look at you I'm laughing. I'm like a baby. All right, so look at you. You're just like those gigantic brown eyes, and then I look into it, and then I fall. I've
Let's talk with
fallen.
close your eyes. Nobody hears.
I'm in like a dark pool of chocolate, and I start swimming around, get completely lost. Where am I in the interview?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I understand the problem. Beginning, I wasn't quite, it was like, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so there was a so I went through that process, and then I have literally I my teacher has asked me to for the next 3 months to be still, which is really hard, and my stillness still looks busy, but it's way stiller than I used to be, and I understand the virtues of just taking it and throwing it into the fire, throwing it into the life force, saying, "Hey, I know you're doing something." Why get involved? Why not just sit on the side and watch what you're doing, life force, as I'm
Look, there's a place for
watching?
discipline in practice. I'm not, I spent decades doing very intense practice.
Yeah.
And I did very focused, and I'm not saying everybody has to do that. That's what I had to do, and that's what worked for me. That
Hmm.
was very much a part of my path. Everybody's got to find out how it works for them.
Yeah, but that's like I
And
said, that's the learning that you're talking about because
what
it's
I'm teaching people is how to really find their way because people need to be empowered that it's not outside of them. Even though you can be here and we can connect and you can get a certain transmission or energetic hit
hmm
from somebody who's resonating on that a deeper force of life energy, that presence, that's very helpful. But that just gives you access to what you already are. So
hmm
once you've had that, then spiritual maturity is beginning to see how that works, how it actually
mm
brings up your material that needs to be healed, how it actually transforms your perspective of your life, your relationships, your work, your health, your money, the whole thing. And so this is why it's so incredible because it's for a whole life. It actually allows us to become fully human,
mm
not to transcend the human. That's the old religious spiritual kind of thing, like, the impure, whatever, you're going to transcend it. No, we need to actually enliven the human with consciousness so that we can live consciously. If people were realized on this planet, if people were born realized, we would have a different planet.
mm
I was just thinking about the Ohlone Indians who lived in the San Francisco Bay Area in harmony with nature for 10,000 years.
hmm
They were tuned in. They were plugged in.
mm
We have gotten cut off from that and in our heads, and we're poisoning our planet. We're poisoning
mm
the environment,
hmm
and now we're suffering because of it. But it's this awakening is about becoming fully human.
Well, and I
I,
would, that statement, are we spiritual beings having a human experience, or human beings have, what is it? A spiritual being having a human experience, or human beings having a spiritual experience? No, you're shaking your head. No.
well, those are all those aren't helpful. I don't think those are helpful concepts.
Okay.
Those are concepts. I think what's more important is that you right now, or whoever is listening right now, go inside themselves and really tune in and find out what's really present right now.
hmm
So if the teachers you've been working with are saying you need to have more stillness, well, what does that mean? Well, you only you can find out what that means.
hmm
If it's even true for you, I don't know. But it could be that you tune in and you say, oh yeah, I'm kind of agitated, or I'm like feeling pressured. I feel like I have to get the next thing done. So you bring a kind of patience or a kind of acceptance to your experience, or a kind of spaciousness to allow yourself to have that kind of discomfort, even though you're not acting on it.
Mm.
So in that kind of, you're learning. When you begin to realize that awakening, and the beginning of awakening is a glimpse of the truth, but the beginning of the path, the middle, and the end are the same.
Mm.
That the essence of it are the same. So along the way, you in a sense, you really learn how to live this life,
Mm.
regardless of your circumstances, regardless of the conditions you have to deal with, whether you've got a very fortunate life or a very unfortunate life.
Mm.
And there's a huge range of what people have to live with today. Huge.
So I have two questions. One, so I want to understand your own path, and like how, and I also want to understand when I hear you and Sangha and actually talking to people and tuning into people and getting a sense of where they are on this continuum. I don't know which question I should ask first. Which one do you want to answer? Your own life and how you've kind of navigated and what your life. Like, I just want to know for someone who is awakening or has been awakening way longer than I have since you're 16 or whatever, right? 18. You've been awakened.
16, yeah.
Yeah, you've been
Well, no,
awakening.
the process really became conscious when I was 16. With that
Yeah.
it was an enlightenment experience. It wasn't full realization by any means, but it changed my whole life, that's for sure. And I didn't even know what happened, as you know, for like 4 years. I mean, it was
Mm.
there happening, but I didn't know what it was. So I met somebody.
Mm.
Ann Armstrong was the one who told me. But
Yeah. So what was your process like? So you didn't even know that you were
well, it's been a
awakening.
lifelong, and still is, every moment. I'm learning every moment. It's no different now than it was when I was 16. I mean, I've learned a few things, thank goodness. And there's been a lot of development. But, as I said to you the other day, I never think about this. It's not, I mean, I used to. I used to read all the books and I used to all that, but I got to a point, and I have students now who are there where they can't read the stuff anymore. They can't, because it's happening.
Mm.
It's when it's really, when you're aligned with it, it's happening every moment. You don't, reading about it is,
Mm.
why
Mm.
would you? I mean, it's
Well, give me a sense of what you've learned recently, like an example of something you're like, oh, it's interesting. I just learned something. Give us a recent example so we have a
well,
sense of
you
what it
have to
means.
understand what I mean by learning. Learning to me it is not cognitively based at all.
Hmm.
There is no thought, oh, I learned something. That
Oh,
doesn't, oh no.
so what is it then? So how do
Oh
you know
yeah.
you've
Oh
learned?
no. It's the same as when you play the violin. I grew up as a concert violinist, and you're in harmony with the music. There's something learning is paying attention and being open. I can't, it's like, how do you keep your balance? You have to think about it.
Hmm. So is it a internal sense that I know something is shifted, or I feel a certain lightness, or what's the experiential sense? How do you know that you're learning?
You don't.
Well, then how do you know you're learning all the time? What is the basis of...
No, insight is later.
Oh,
Insight is later. So it's a kind of openness and availability to the moment that doesn't involve thought. Thought's in the way.
hmm. Okay.
So, so it's,
Okay.
see, I don't teach concepts. I mean, they
Okay.
come out when I'm actually teaching, when I'm actually working with groups and individuals. Teaching comes through, but it's not thought. It doesn't come through a thought process. It's channeled somehow.
Right.
So intellectual or philosophical questions, they're I'm more interested in, like, working, let's say, with you right now,
Hmm.
with what's going on for you.
Okay.
So, what is it that when you tune into yourself right now, when you close your eyes, why don't you close
Okay.
your eyes for a second? And
Okay.
maybe people listening can try this.
Okay.
So, when you close your eyes right now and you just breathe and sense where you are, just feeling how you feel, noticing the contact with the chair, the floor, the movement of your breath, the sound of my voice. You're tuning in, you're feeling, I can sense that you're starting to get a little more open.
Hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
what is it, what are you aware of right now? Are you comfortable? Are you feeling like you have to do the interview, like you have to, you
Yeah,
have,
no, I feel an overwhelming amount of energy. I feel some energy that's coming out of my eye going this direction. When when you said to tune into your energy, it was an open up this way. Like I just felt like a like
okay.
opening from the top of my head
And did
up.
it just happen or did you think about it or did it just keep happening?
When you said tune in, when I did that, that's immediately what happened. And when you were talking, you said something, and I just felt like a, like it felt like
Okay.
almost like a jiffy pop, like just.
Okay. So learning is learning is the force of nature.
Hmm.
It's how evolution has happened.
Hmm.
We don't really understand learning.
Hmm.
I mean, how do you go from not speaking a foreign language to speaking it? Yes, you did the practice and you did the sort of exercise, but at some point, it's in your, at some point, it's there,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
so there's a kind of learning that there's different kinds of learning. I mean, the kind of teaching people how to learn is how to learn to allow the force of nature to really lead. That's
Hmm.
teaching. And
Hmm.
so what we learn is how we're in the way. And so what you begin to notice is, well, let's see, when I get in touch with my feelings, immediate they start coming up, but then I think about what my mother did to me, and then it all stops. So I tell people when they're starting having emotional release, I said, it's notice if what stopped it. Notice what stopped the natural movement. Was it thought?
Hmm.
Was it belief?
Hmm.
Was it a physical contraction? So by paying attention on that level, you're learning. Now, can you stop the stopping? No.
Hmm.
But what stops the stopping?
It
Our
feels,
true nature. Our
yeah.
true letting go is we do egos do not let go. Egos hold on. Egos are all about survival and comfort and acquisition and making things better.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
Always. That's human nature is to improve the situation, to do
Mm-hmm.
everything you can to have a better. That's why is everyone like that's what we're doing. We're trying to improve our life or whatever, or just have a good life or something like that. So, um, but to align with this force, if when I'm teaching people how to learn, I'm teaching them how to learn to allow realization to unfold. That's what I'm teaching.
Okay.
So that is a kind of learning that will cross contextualize in everything you do. Talk to my assistant Lisa; she'll tell you because she sees enough of me and around me enough in ordinary life, and she keeps telling me that's amazing how you do all these different things. She can see it happening. I can't explain it because I don't have that perspective. Just
Mm-hmm.
living my life and doing my thing, right? But it's like, but there's a certain kind of like I've lived in this apartment in San Francisco for almost 40 years. And I've been going up and down the same flights of stairs for 4 years. But to me, it doesn't feel like same old stairs. It's like it never happened before.
Mm-hmm. So it's hard for you to
So,
explain what's happening, but
so, so yeah, so Zen mind, as Suzuki Roshi pointed out, was beginner's mind. You're always open, available, and ready. So there's a kind of innocence in your attitude. There's an openness. There isn't this preconceived belief about what's happening. Gurdjieff, who was a teacher of Ouspensky wrote In Search of the Miraculous, I believe. He said, people don't have new experiences because they're always translating new experiences into their old way of thinking. So you
mm,
have to learn how to have an open mind. You
mm,
can't learn if you don't have an open mind.
mm. Okay, so
Oh,
let's explain what's happening here
yeah,
between
yeah.
you and I. So you're tuning. What are you doing? I can feel and you had said to me over the phone the other day, you're not doing anything except there's
Paying
some
attention.
yeah, so there's something that being in your presence opens up some type of energetic
Yeah.
experience with
Yeah, because,
myself.
yes, because I'm just in alignment with that force, you could say, and somehow or other because you're accessing it and you're starting to resonate on that frequency, it facilitates you opening into that force. That's all. So
Okay.
that's called in sort of Buddhist Dharma tradition, transmission of the Dharma. That's what that really means. But is it really me giving you something you don't have? No. It's more like that resonant part of you being activated by that energetic field. So it begins to resonate that.
So you're like a tuning fork. Bing.
No,
So
that's one
you're
way to see it,
yeah,
sure.
so you're kind of now
That's,
vibrating at like this is your kind of status quo or vibrating at a certain level. So here comes CJ walking along. I'm like, "Hey, John Bernie." And then all of a sudden there's a part of me that goes, "Oh, bing."
but that's because you're very much available for that. And a lot of people are. They're not aware of it at all. Even though I can see, even though when I'm with someone, the grocery store, a neighbor across the street, whatever, and or a dog walking or whatever, it's like, or even plants and trees, everything. Everything is this life force. And so when you're aware of that, there's always a sense of connection, always.
I see. So,
And so now most people are not necessarily conscious of the fact that they are that also. Everyone is this. Everyone fundamentally is already what's so-called enlightened.
right.
That's just reality.
But coming in
Awakening,
contact with you, but it's
awakening is becoming, literally, the simplest description of awakening is literally becoming conscious of reality. Reality is not our projection. It's
mm,
not our story. It's not what we think. It's not what we believe. Reality is literally a infinite, inexplicable vastness of being.
but when I've heard you listen to this song, when I've listened to your presentations with the Sangha, like you can tune into, so you have,
I'm doing healing work with people, yeah. So because I have a background as a healer, so I facilitate people in their sort of psychodynamic process or emotional, physical healing process, and help them work with that in a way that actually allows them to be more embodied in presence.
okay, so you
So I'm
would,
doing both. I'm doing both. I'm doing the transmission work for sure, and also the healing work, and teaching the integration of both of those.
so when you're, okay, so we're talking right now. I'm sure you're doing work, healing work on me as we're talking. I know that that's the case. How is it that you're able to do that both? Like the tuning fork, I understand because you're just resonating.
I'm not really doing any of it. I'm just guiding people's attention so that natural process in them can unfold.
And so is it that you feel empathic feelings like, oh, I feel
Oh, I
like,
can.
okay.
Certainly.
So
I mean,
how,
there are times where somebody is feeling something and they're not even feeling it, and tears will start coming out of my eyes. Yeah, I do have that. But I'm showing people how to pay attention to their experience. That's what I mean. I'm showing them how to be with what's happening in their experience so that they can actually heal and be transformed.
okay, so if you look into my energy right now, what would be the things that, so tell me, I don't know if you can consciously explain what's happening or can
Let
you?
me let me say this: that whatever needed to be communicated on the level is already happening and has been happening the whole time we've been together.
Oh.
That's not something that you or I are cognitively, hope, thank goodness, involved in because we'd mess it up.
Okay, so there's just, so here's what I'm getting from this. You're vibrating at a certain level, ding, and my presence in front of you, if I'm at all aware or can sense that, I'm also bing, oh, bing. We're resonating at
But
some,
when you tune into that, which is the life force that is working through your body, mind, construct, incarnation, then you'll see what's next for you. And until you do that,
um,
you won't know the next step. So that's what I mean. You're learning how to learn. You're learning how to take the next step, not because you've done all the analysis and you've weighed everything in your mind and you know, okay, based on my 5-year plan, this is my next step. No, 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 no. That's not learning in the level I'm teaching. I'm teaching learning in terms of becoming one with the infinite.
right.
Let me realize
Okay,
that's
tuning
what.
into that. Okay, so,
Yeah. So I'm teaching people how to let that do the work, and to also teach people what their responsibility is in that and what isn't the responsibility. A lot of people have a mistaken idea of what their responsibility is in terms of how this unfolds. And I'm trying to clarify that in my teaching. It's hard to do, but I'm working on it. That's one of the things
mm,
I'm really working on because I get a lot of people who've been on the path a long time, who've done retreats for years, been with all kinds of teachers, done all kinds of practices, and are, many of them are therapists, healers also, and even spiritual teachers who are students. And it's an incredible process, and so many people are becoming realized. I mean, it's working. And so I'm learning. My interest really personally is to help. certainly. And I'm interested in finding out whatever can help and what's going to be the most efficient and ecological way for somebody to heal and be transformed. So I'm constantly learning how that works as I work with each individual. And I know ahead of time.
Okay.
I never, when I'm with you right now, I mean, we're not really having a session. This is more a talk about it. It's not quite that. I mean, that would be a different even though it's still happening and we can both sense that. And that would be lovely and wonderful. I'd love to do that with you, but it's also, and people listen to the podcast, they can probably pick up on it and get a sense of how that's working.
So I think the next time we talk, let's talk about the responsibility, what you're responsible for or not. Or we'll see what shows up, which is, I know, your preferred way.
No, that's a great thing to talk about, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. Because and this is what they say in Zen, where you're putting the cart in front of the horse. You can hit the cart forever, but nothing's going to move. So it's just really understanding what is my will and what is thy will, so to speak. And ultimately, you align with thy will. That's what I'm really teaching. But not conceptually, actually direct experientially, you could say.
Right. All right.
And there's more to talk about.
There is more to talk about. We've been talking to John Burney about, he has 2 books, Ordinary Freedom, and also his newest book, The Unbelievable, hold it up, Unbelievable Happiness of What Is. But really, it's beyond belief. Really, it's about beyond belief is the title, the alternate title. That's what you said, correct?
That's right. Well, that's the subtitle, Beyond Belief, to love, fulfillment, and spiritual awakening. It's so great to see you.
It's really great to see you too. I love how the little purple orb is going. I love
my mobile above my head.
I love how my energy is just kind of like, I mean, I feel like I'm like throughout the whole interview. It's amazing. I just haven't fallen over into the ground and taken a nap.
Well, I look forward to the next time we talk.
Okay, I'll talk to you on Tuesday. All right, bye.
Bye.
Have a good.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.